Do as I said or quit!
I'm done.
Do as I said or quit, the CEO told the single dad, so he took his daughter and walked away. The CEO had only one command for the single dad that afternoon: do as she said or quit. But when the paralyzed CEO gave him that ultimatum outside a crowded city park, she never imagined he would choose his daughter over the highest-paying job he had ever held. He simply looked at his little girl, took her hand, and walked away. What she did not know was that his decision would eventually change her life in a way no doctor, business partner, or fortune ever could. Before we continue, if you believe kindness still matters, that people deserve second chances, and that family should never be forgotten, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Soul Tales. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories about kindness, courage, and second chances. The single dad's name was Daniel, a quiet man in his late 30s who had learned to live without complaining. Every morning, he woke before sunrise, prepared breakfast for his 8-year-old daughter Lily, packed her school bag, and then hurried to his job at one of the city's most successful technology companies. He was not an executive, not a manager, and certainly not the kind of employee whose name appeared in newspapers. He worked as a senior operations coordinator, solving problems nobody noticed until they went wrong. Daniel had accepted the job because it offered health insurance, steady income, and enough flexibility to raise Lily after losing his wife several years earlier. His daughter was the center of every decision he made. He had promised her mother before she died that Lily would never grow up feeling alone, and Daniel had built his entire life around keeping that promise. The company belonged to Victoria Hayes, a brilliant and fiercely ambitious CEO whose name was known throughout the business world. Victoria had built the company from a small office into a multi-million-dollar corporation, but a tragic accident had changed her life. A spinal injury had left her paralyzed from the waist down. She remained sharp, intelligent, and determined, but the independence she once took for granted had disappeared almost overnight. She now used a wheelchair and depended on others for many ordinary things. Her greatest frustration was not her disability itself. It was the way people looked at her afterward, as if paralysis had somehow made her less capable of making decisions. She became harder, colder, and more demanding, determined to prove every day that nobody could control her life. One Saturday afternoon, Victoria had taken her healthy 10-year-old daughter Emma to a large park near the company's downtown headquarters. Emma loved the park because it had a beautiful walking trail, a small lake, and a playground surrounded by tall trees. Victoria could not move around the park as easily as Emma could, so they sat together near the entrance while waiting for their company driver. The driver was supposed to arrive at 4 o'clock. 4 came and went. Then 4:15. Then 4:30. Victoria's patience disappeared with every passing minute. Emma tried to distract herself by watching children play, but Victoria kept checking her phone. Daniel happened to be there with Lily because he had promised her an afternoon at the park before returning home to prepare for Monday's work. He had just finished helping Lily tie her shoelaces when he noticed Victoria struggling to move her wheelchair slightly away from a crowded pathway. He did not know she was his company's CEO. To him, she was simply a mother waiting with her daughter. He quietly helped move a fallen branch away from the wheelchair and then returned to Lily without expecting anything in return. A few minutes later, Victoria's driver finally arrived, breathless and apologetic. Victoria's frustration erupted. She had been waiting for nearly 40 minutes, and she had already received several urgent messages from the office. She turned to Daniel, recognizing him from the company, and suddenly remembered that he was supposed to be available for an important operational call that afternoon. She blamed him for not answering quickly enough, even though he had been spending his scheduled personal time with his daughter. Daniel tried to explain that he had informed his supervisor before leaving the office and had promised Lily that afternoon. But Victoria was already angry. She told him that employees did not get to decide when company priorities mattered. She expected him to return to the office immediately, cancel his plans, and handle the emergency before the end of the day. Daniel looked at Lily, who was holding a small paper bag containing the ice cream he had promised her. Her face slowly changed when she realized her father might have to leave. Victoria saw the hesitation and gave him an ultimatum. She made it clear that he could either do exactly what she demanded or quit. To her, it was another business decision. One employee refusing an order was simply unacceptable. But to Daniel, those words landed differently. He looked at the little girl standing beside him, remembering every hospital room, every school morning, every night when Lily had cried quietly because she missed her mother. He knew how many times he had missed ordinary moments because of work. He knew how quickly childhood disappeared. And he knew that this particular afternoon was not worth teaching his daughter that she would always come second. Daniel did not argue. He did not insult Victoria. He simply took Lily's hand, picked up her small bag, and walked away. The CEO watched him leave, expecting him to turn around after a few steps. He never did. Lily looked back once, but Daniel gently squeezed her hand and kept walking toward the park. That evening, Daniel sat at his kitchen table and calculated everything he had lost. His job had provided security. Without it, the mortgage would become difficult. Lily's school fees would be a struggle. The medical bills from his wife's final year still remained. He was frightened, but he refused to let Lily see it. He made dinner, helped her with homework, and listened as she excitedly described everything she had seen at the park. For the first time in months, Daniel realized he had actually been present for the entire afternoon. The next morning, he returned his company identification card. He expected humiliation, but instead he felt something he had almost forgotten: peace. He began applying for other jobs. Days turned into weeks. Several companies rejected him because he was considered overqualified for smaller positions, while others offered salaries far below what he needed. He began driving for a delivery service in the evenings, working long hours while still making sure Lily had breakfast before school. He was exhausted, but he never complained. Meanwhile, Victoria discovered something unexpected. The emergency Daniel had been asked to handle had not been solved by the executives who remained at the office. In fact, the situation became worse. A major client threatened to cancel a multi-million-dollar contract because of a technical and logistical problem that Daniel had quietly prevented dozens of times. Managers searched through old reports and discovered that the systems keeping the company's operation stable had been designed and maintained largely by him. Victoria began reading Daniel's old reports. She found handwritten notes explaining problems before they happened, cost-saving recommendations he had never taken credit for, and emergency plans that had protected the company during previous crises. She realized that the man she had dismissed as an ordinary employee had been one of the invisible reasons her company functioned so well. But the biggest discovery came from a security recording at the park. Victoria watched the footage of that afternoon and saw something she had missed while angry. Daniel had not abandoned his responsibility. He had first helped her move her wheelchair. He had checked whether she needed assistance. He had patiently waited while she argued with the driver. And when she gave him the choice between his job and his daughter, he had chosen his child without disrespecting anyone. For the first time since her accident, Victoria questioned herself instead of everyone around her. She asked her assistant to find Daniel, but he refused to return immediately. Not because he hated Victoria, but because he wanted a workplace where his responsibilities as a father would not be treated as weakness. Victoria understood. She offered him his old position back with better flexibility, but Daniel declined. Then she offered him something different, a leadership position designing a family-friendly operations program for the entire company. Daniel finally agreed to meet her. When they sat together in the same park weeks later, the atmosphere was completely different. Victoria was still in her wheelchair, Emma was playing nearby with Lily, and the driver was waiting exactly where he was supposed to be. Victoria admitted that she had been wrong. She told Daniel that she had spent years fighting to prove that nobody could take control of her life, yet somewhere along the way she had started controlling everyone else's. Daniel did not lecture her. He simply told her that strength was not always about refusing help or demanding obedience. Sometimes strength was knowing what mattered most and having the courage to protect it. Victoria looked toward the two girls playing together and finally understood why Daniel had walked away that day. He had not walked away because he was weak. He had walked away because he knew exactly what he was worth, and more importantly, he knew what his daughter was worth. Months later, Daniel became one of the company's most respected leaders. Victoria changed the company's policies so parents could attend important moments in their children's lives without fear of losing their jobs. She also became more open about her disability, no longer seeing assistance as a symbol of weakness. Emma and Lily became close friends, and the park where everything had fallen apart became the place where two families began healing in unexpected ways. If this story touched your heart, please support the video with a like, share it with someone who believes family comes first, and subscribe to Soul Tales for more stories about kindness, courage, and second chances. And before the story ends, I want to ask you something special. Comment, "Family comes first," if you believe no job, no title, and no amount of money should ever make a loving parent feel guilty for choosing their child. Daniel once walked away from the most secure job he had ever known because his daughter needed her father more than a company needed another employee. He thought that moment had cost him everything. Instead, it taught him that sometimes walking away is not losing. Sometimes it is the first step toward finding a life that truly belongs to you. And for Victoria, the CEO who once believed obedience was the same as loyalty, that quiet father taught her the most important lesson of her career: people may work for a company, but their hearts belong to the people waiting for them at home.